the oil and gas industry is dangerous. In the news we often hear about accidents and near accidents. It was worse in earlier times, but how is it now? My brother and I will try to find an answer. In Stavanger, the oil capital of Norway, we find Dr. Svein Onstad. He is medical director of the air ambulance and has experienced many accidents in the oil industry. In old newspapers from 1980, we have read that you were on board of one of the helicopters trying to save persons after the terrible Alexander Kielland accident that killed 123 persons. Can you tell us about this accident?
Yes, I was just starting the service at that time, and this was actually my first mission, my first real scramble. So it was indeed special. We had at that time 3 helicopters out to the accident scene, since it was a very big accident, and I was on helicopter number 3. And I remember one of the pilots who should take our helicopter out to the sea. He had to be flown by a Norwegian fighting aircraft, a so-called F5, from an airbase called Rygge over to Sola before he could fly basically, because we did not have so many pilots to man 3 helicopters. As soon as he arrived, we went out in the sea, and it was bad weather, bad visibility, but we found the accident place, and we could see the platform has capsized, and we could see the legs of the platform stand out of the water. We could of course not see the platform. We also found some dead bodies in the water, which we recovered, and we saw a lot of wreckage and so on, but we did not find anyone alive. They had been rescued before we arrived. But it was indeed special, and I thought to myself, it can't be anything worse than this. At the end of the 70s and also at the beginning of the 80s, there were more not so good routines in health and security environment, and they did not have so good and strict procedures concerning safety as they have today. It was more a bit like in the Old West, and a bit more relaxed attitude to safety, and of course that could have very bad consequences at that time. Today it's much better. The leaders of the company has developed very good procedures and routines, and also the labor organizations. There are several labor organizations in the oil industry, and all those have been very active and very good in making procedures and getting the leaders of the companies to accept these procedures concerning safety. And I think those 2 factors are the most important. In addition, of course, we also have got more advanced and safer equipment than before, and the whole culture in the industry or services focusing more on safety now than for 30 years ago. I think the procedures can always be better, but what can be better is the personnel performing the procedures and the training of the personnel. That can always be better, and to let people be aware of the risk and always knowing what to do. That's the way to go, and in that case we can always improve ourselves.
Geir Svaroporaut is professor in safety science. He has been working with health risk in the petroleum sector. We went to him to hear his opinions about the situation.
It's really true that there's been a great improvement in the safety situation in the petroleum activities in the North Sea during 30 to 40 years. This illustration shows the development in the mortality rate due to occupational incidents on different types of installations in the Norwegian Sea. As we can see, the rates were really huge at the end of the 1960s and during the 1970s. But from about 1980, we have experienced a great improvement and quite low mortality rates. And if we take a look at the present situation, it's not possible to use the data for mortality rate. Then we have to use morbidity or injury rate. And as we can see, it has been lowered by almost 70 to 90% from year 2000 till now, 2010-2015. So it's correct to say that the risk level has been quite lowering during the last decades. And I think the reason behind this improvement is that different actors, the authorities as well as the companies and the labor unions and other organizations related to petroleum activities in the North Sea, they have had a mutual interest to improve the situation. And they have been able to cooperate under high mutual trust, trusting each other, working with the same goals, and then they have made it possible to improve the situation. And typical for the Norwegian situation is that the Norwegian Petroleum Safety Authority, they have a coordinating action and they use the regulations in a quite active way to force improvements. Typical for the Norwegian set of regulation is that they do not prescribe specific solutions, but they more describe the situations that should be achieved, the level of safety that you should work towards. So in a way it is up to the different actors, the different companies, to define their own goals and put them forward to the authorities for acceptance. And then you have to engage highly with the workers, so that both the workers, the companies and the authorities act towards the same goals. I think this high degree of mutual trust and mutual eagerness to work together is a core factor for the improvements on the Norwegian petroleum sector. But now we see changes in the sector that is possibly threatening. The high integration operations, where offshore-onshore operations are highly integrated and where subsea activities also are integrated with topside activities, make the system even more complicated. And we know from risk theory and risk praxis that complicated systems often are followed by risk increase. So we have to be aware that these highly integration concepts might introduce new risks that we don't know from before. But we think that with great awareness, when different companies and the authorities and the trade unions are able to make mutual risk images, then they can still be able to work towards the same goals, and then we may succeed even through periods with high cost pressure. And another topic of concern is that quite a lot of the fixed installations on the Norwegian continental shelf are now getting quite old. So the maintenance requirements are getting quite high, and that also impose costs on the sector that we have to be aware about.
Working in the North Sea on the oil rig was a tough job, and to start with we had many accidents, and these were reported from the companies to the government authorities. And all the reports and the correspondence between the authorities and the companies are placed in this archive, which is one of the ones we have from various government agencies and private companies. This is from the Oil Office, the first state agency dealing with oil issues. And here is one of the letters. All of these are put on the internet, so anybody can access them and have a look. This one is from a person who was killed because a big item fell down and hit him, and he was killed instantly. And this is the report on what happened from the Oil Office in Oslo. And the interesting thing about these documents is that we don't only get the report, we get the correspondence between the company and the authorities, and they are also discussing what they want to do afterwards to improve the work environment. So you get a very good picture of both what happened, but also how the various actors dealt with the issue and what they did to improve conditions. Okay, this one is Odd Magne Rørvik, as I mentioned, killed by a big item that fell down and hit him, and there's a pretty large report, as you can see. And here you can just continue to the next letter dealing with the same matter from another state agency. And you see how they are dealing with this issue, what kind of efforts they make to improve working conditions. And these are pictures of the original documents, and nothing is left out, so you can actually look at the same documents that were written almost more than 40 years ago. And these are the only reports that are kept, so these are as good as having the originals. Well, the Norwegian Oil and Gas Archive, they collect records from both the oil and gas companies and the state agencies that deal with questions concerning the oil and gas business. And we get the records from all of these. And nobody knows the whole truth, but when we get accurate documents that were made when the things happened, from various persons and various companies and institutions, we get a pretty good picture of what happened. For instance, the Alexander Kielland accident, which was the biggest Norwegian accident with many people killed. From this incident we have the report from the police that did the investigation, which you can see here. Many boxes with lots of documents. Of course, this is not open to the public yet, but it will be eventually. And anybody can go in and study this report that was made right after the accident happened. But in addition to this, we have the records from the company that owned the rig, and we have the records from the company that operated the field, and those who were placed on various positions on the neighboring platforms, who also made their reports. And we have letters from relatives of those who died, and we have documents from various organizations that has worked with this accident before and after things happened. And this all together makes a very good picture that helps us understand what happened and to see things from various angles. And that is what makes archives so interesting. And also that they are made without the plan of being published, but just to document accurately what actually happened. And when you get this from all these different angles, it's almost like you become someone who can see things from all sides, and it helps you understand what happened. The world changes all the time, and very rapidly. And at the same time, the human mind is a very fragile thing. We don't remember what happened even a year ago. And also human life is very short. So we might live for another few decades and then we're gone. And nobody knows what happened if they didn't experience it themselves. And even when they experienced it themselves, they will forget many things. This is where records come in. Because when everything has disappeared and things are forgotten, they are still documented in the records. Here, for example, we have all the drawings and plans for one of the biggest gas fields in the North Sea that supplied Britain with most of its natural gas for energy purposes for many decades. Now everything is gone. The only thing that is left are the records. And from these records, even the small tiny drawings that are small miniatures of the original drawings, correspondence, plans, minutes of meetings, all this makes it possible for us to study and to understand how this field was run, what happened, what were the successes, what were the accidents, why did it happen, how could it be improved. All this helps us to understand the energy history of the North Sea in Norway and in any other part of the world. So for the Norwegian Oil and Gas Archive, it is our task to make sure that important records from the companies and from the state agencies and even from persons that have been working with oil and gas are kept so that you can study them in 10 years, in 100 years, or even in 1,000 years.